When you think about Game of Thrones, you might feel disappointed when you look at how it ended. I do too. But another issue I have is that Sansa Stark becoming Queen of the North is absolutely offensive to the intellect of the fans, but it is especially offensive to how certain female characters are portrayed. Dan Benioff and DB Weiss, after season 4 of Game of Thrones, became experts at creating contrived plots and unnatural character development. One huge consequence of this is that fans grew to hate a character that I think is incredibly well written by George R.R. Martin in the books. And I know there's a segment of book fans that do not like Sansa either, but even they have to admit that her story in Game of Thrones was pretty ridiculous. Let's go ahead and jump into this, and I'm going to say something right now, and I'll probably say it again before the end. Abusing women does not empower women. See, unlike George R.R. Martin, D&D do not believe that themes are all that important. They've been quoted on this. So instead of following the slow and gradual growth of a character like Sansa Stark from the books, they decided that after season 4, they were going to go ahead and throw her into the most baffling plotline in the show. That is, marrying her to Ramsay Bolton. But let's back up here just a little bit, because a lot of people feel that season 4 is the perfect season from Game of Thrones, and I'm not going for a hot take here. Season 4 is great, but Sansa's plot begins to go off the rails here in this season, and it never recovers or resembles the book material available at all. If you haven't read the books, let me introduce you to Elaine Stone. It is fundamentally necessary for book Sansa to not reveal herself. Sansa takes on the identity of Elaine Stone because that is what Littlefinger has essentially manipulated her to do. Elaine Stone is a big part of Sansa's trajectory. By the time we get sample readings from the Winds of Winter, Sansa is mostly forgotten, as the alter ego, Elaine Stone, becomes not just her identity to everyone else, but also herself. While I don't believe psychological manipulation or psychological abuse equates to character empowerment, the recognition of that manipulation and mental abuse can develop a character's growth depending on how they learn from it. Will that happen in the books? We don't know, because they're not completed. And I was originally going to get into Littlefinger and the politics of the Eyrie with the different Royce factions, but I really want to save that for a later time when I discuss Sansa and A Feast for Crows. But to summarize more vaguely about where Sansa's character is at in the books, Sansa has been positioned by George R.R. Martin to begin untying the enigma that is Littlefinger. And the idea many fans have is that by observing Littlefinger, Sansa may figure him out, ultimately learning from him and becoming her own political mastermind in her own right, unlike Game of Thrones proceeding to have her assaulted by Ramsay and calling that character development. At this point, Sansa may still just be a game piece for Littlefinger, but the book is hinting at much more political understanding and growth from Sansa or Elaine Stone, as well as, personally, she is learning to manipulate other characters as she seemingly has been practicing manipulating others with Robin Arryn. I keep asking myself if she sincerely cares for Robin or if she just is manipulating him into becoming her own game piece. It's not terrible that the show changes this, it's terrible that the show does not replace it with something equally interesting that organically develops the character. I shouldn't have to keep saying this, but abusing women does not empower women, and it doesn't suddenly give them a crash course in Winterfell's economy either. Sansa may very well become Queen of the North, and if that happens, you'll be able to go back in the books and see the character develop the skills needed to get her there. They won't just be given to her as a gift for surviving Ramsay. Now, let's forget the misguided assumption by D&D that abusing women empowers them, and we'll pretend that torturing a character offers something more interesting. And guess what? We actually have a perfect way to compare another character to a somewhat similar experience. Let's look at the show in a vacuum and ignore the book material for context, because why not? You know they did. As Sansa is married to Ramsay in the show, that ultimately has her paired up with Theon. Now this is helpful because if abusing Sansa empowers her, maybe abusing Theon empowered him. What do you think? But it doesn't. Theon is obviously subjected to more psychological abuse from Ramsay to where Theon totally loses his identity. And throughout all of the abuse and torture, it is Theon's guilt that actually appears to make him seem like he thinks he deserves it. And the direction the show takes, Theon I actually really do like, because it doesn't focus on empowering him by making him survive horrible situations, but instead, Theon finds himself. His character arc is that of redemption, but what really keeps his character conflicted is a lack of identity from the very start when he is just Ned Stark's ward. So finding his identity both as a Greyjoy and a Stark by the end is very fitting. Do you see the connection here I'm trying to make? Theon becomes Reek. In the book, Sansa becomes Elaine Stone. Now, surviving the abuse did not empower Theon, but it did play into him losing his identity and becoming Reek, continuing with the theme from earlier on when his story is really all about his insecure identity. George R.R. Martin has numerous characters with alter egos, and how they work their way through that builds and develops their character, giving them believable growth so that when we get a conclusion for that character's story arc, we don't just understand, but we agree. Theon's abuse is just an aspect of his particular arc, but it was nuanced with the bigger picture for his character in mind. Sansa is abused, and it does nothing for the audience other than having them ask a lot of logical questions. Specifically, why did she even agree to marry Ramsay? And now, she's trapped in an abusive marriage, and considering that D&D don't believe in themes, they just write situations. When Theon and her escape Winterfell, nothing has really been gained for Sansa. Nothing that we get to see, nothing that we get to hear, we just don't get anything out of that situation. While later on, she says she knows how Ramsay thinks when, for whatever reason, she's offended Jon didn't consult with her over battle strategy. The show is trying to tell us that off-screen, Sansa was developing this critical understanding not just of Ramsay, but also I guess the economic and political nuances of Winterfell and the North. A lot of lazy writing can be seen in shows and movies when you get a lot of exposition with dialogue, basically telling you, the audience, what is going on. But D&D don't even do that. A big rule in screenwriting is show, don't tell. Well, they don't show, and half the time they don't even tell. The only thing Game of Thrones shows or tells its audience about Sansa from season 5 through 8 is that she was abused by Ramsay. Then they proceed to tell us that now she's a political force all on her own and not just someone else's game piece. And they keep showing us her creating friction with Jon and later Arya, but then assume we'll get back on her side when she kills Littlefinger. But she figures Littlefinger's plot out off screen. But we don't know because they don't show us that. But they also imply that Bran knows everything and must have told Sansa and Arya off screen as well, so it wasn't really her figuring anything out. Everything that the show wants us to believe created Sansa deserving of becoming Queen of the North happens off screen. The only thing they show us or give us with dialogue is Sansa being abused in season 5. It's the most offensive message the show could have made about a character, and thank God the books are clearly taking her in a different direction, because like I said, abusing women does not empower women. And I don't think that was the goal or the message that they were going for, because again, they don't believe in themes. This is actually what kind of bailing on source material and just kind of winging it can lead us to. They didn't arrive at this intentionally, they got here accidentally, which is almost more offensive. I know a lot of people dislike Sansa and the show did her no favors, but if you're like me and you do like this character, click this next video here and we'll talk about her character's beginnings in the first book. Thanks for watching.